hi, Keita. I just saw you.
You're good to go.
All right, hi everyone. We will call the meeting to order. We have the agenda. Can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. We have the board calendar. John, anything to add from that?
No, nothing unique on that at this point. Just the upcoming dates.
Okay, looks like it's got all the meetings for next year, so take note of those. And we can head into reports from superintendent and staff.
Sounds good. Well, I am going to share my screen for a presentation that my team created. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to, before we get started, just lift up all the members of my team who have been working extremely diligently since last March, early March, when we first suspected that we were going to be affected by COVID-19. It was actually February. We put out that survey to district families, just seeing if they had technology, and started doing a lot of upfront work in order to provide the highest level of care for our children, as well as our staff and families. Since that time, it has been, the load has not lightened. I would say it's only increased and picked up more weight as we've neared the 2021 school year. And my team has done a tremendous job and has worked extensively, has sacrificed much personally, including the summertime. While we don't take a lot of time away, it is our time to get away because we all like to be here when children are here and staff are here. But there's been very little vacation days taken by my team, and there's been some that's been planned and canceled in order to try and prepare for this upcoming school year. So tonight we collaborated on a presentation that will feature some of the items, kind of a summary of our plan for the year. This afternoon, we sent out an email to staff and an email to families noting our plans, our kind of summary plans for 2021. We did mention in both of those messages that we are not definitive as to how we will open school. We know that there will be an online option, but we don't know exactly what other option will exist, what other programming will exist. And there's some reasons for that. The reasons are, first, the dynamic nature of the virus regionally, as well as across the state. And we have been, because of that, we think it's best to hold for a little bit. That's also been at the encouragement of the St. Louis County Health Department. So those are a few of the big reasons why we've waited. And we created these plans utilizing the feedback from many, including families and teachers and the such. But we feel like, given the gravity of the plans, the effect on many people, that we wanted to hear from others again, including what they were thinking at this time. I've heard from a number of people over the past few months. We did that survey at the end of May, early June. It's only about 6 or 7 weeks ago, but we've heard from a lot of people that their feelings have changed in that short period of time. So we are tomorrow going to be putting out a survey, and I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. So sample of lessons learned. What we thought we would do is just, we had this experience. We dove into the online learning for all last March. You've heard me say before that overall, I felt our team did well across the district. When I say team, we have approximately 850 people who receive a paycheck here. I felt overall we did well, but we certainly had a lot of room for improvement. We know it, we saw it, we heard it. And we learned a lot. And we learned a lot from listening to our stakeholders talk about their experiences. So some of the lessons learned were, first of all, with any online programming that we provide, there has to be more regular synchronous live video learning with teachers and students. That was a characteristic and it was more an isolated or not often experience, not a daily experience for online learning last spring, and it must be a daily online experience for this coming school year for that option. Also, we need to do a better job of supporting the social emotional learning and care for our children as well as our adults within this online environment. While it's something that we feel like even as a school district, when present, we could do a better job of and need to do a better job of, it's even more complicated in an online environment. And it's more important to do, given everything that's happening in our community and just the fact of, again, the pandemic. Technology and Wi-Fi access must be available for everyone day one. Chris and her department last year did an incredible job working with Bill Kay. They were working over spring break. We set up things over spring break to get tech and Wi-Fi in the hands of people. We did a good job with the computers. Not perfect, but we did a good job. And we also did a good job with the Wi-Fi. At that point, given it was more emerging and sprung on us, it took us a little bit to get some of the Wi-Fi devices in because those companies were in demand. But that's something that we're prepared to do day one this year. We also have to do a better job looking at the impact of the virus on the health and the economics of families, as well as our staff. How are we seeing their needs and responding to those needs? That'll be critical to take care of people's basic and human needs. This time around for the programming that we provide, regardless of the setting, is that we're going to solicit feedback from parents. We're going to have specific data measures that we'll look at where parents and teachers and some of our older students will be able to rate the effectiveness of the programming that we're offering so that we can pivot and move responsibly. We did this last year. We had a midway point survey. The total experience was a little over 2 months. It seemed like an eternity. It's only a little over 2 months. We did it midway last year, but it's something that we're looking at doing. We will be doing every 4 to 6 weeks this coming year. We also communication with families. This was a learning experience all along the way, is that people were trying to provide as much communication and information to families as possible in an effort to be supportive. And I think while that was appreciated, it also placed sometimes a burden on families to try to keep up with communication from possibly multiple teachers from multiple schools, in addition to just what parents were trying to do just to work from home, support their kids learning from home. So with our efforts this year, we have to be both clear, concise, consistent, and very respectful in how we communicate. We also need to make sure that our staff have time to work and plan together collaboratively. Last year, we jumped into it. Our teachers were used to working in teams on a weekly basis, and we tried to support that collaboration, but it was really difficult in that environment, and we have to make sure we're doing that this year. I mentioned the caring for staff is absolutely critical. I remember being in our kitchen last year, and our 1-year-old was doing something and our 4-year-old was doing something, and maybe our soon-to-be teen was as well. And my wife, who had used to be an elementary school teacher, just said, could you imagine me having to teach in this moment with these guys running around the house and having to support their learning in different ways? And the answer was no. And it is an incredibly difficult spot that our staff were in last year. And we have to make sure whatever setting we're in, that we're respecting where they are while still maintaining our mission to take care of the needs of kids. And similar to children, we have to make sure that our staff has all the tech and the connectivity to Wi-Fi that we provide for our families, and just providing the development for our staff. Last year, they did, I think, an awesome job jumping into online learning. Of course, with anything with technology, you have varying levels of comfort. And this year, coming out of the gate, our staff have already been engaged in some learning modules that have been created. And then they'll have PD at the beginning of the year in terms of the tech strategies and social emotional support. Guiding principles. I'm sorry. Clicked off for a second. Guiding principles that will guide our way. First, the physical and mental health and safety of our students and staff, as well as our community and region, will remain our #1 priority. And that community and region is something that, while we always try to care for our community, our world, we know that our actions and the decisions that we make have implications for the virus and its spread within our schools, possibly our neighborhoods and our region. And we have to be mindful of that. We have to ensure that our kids receive the highest quality academic program, that equity and access, that we're looking at everything through a lens of equity and access in terms of our children, our families, and our staff. And that whatever we create, it'll be key for us to be ready to evolve and adapt based on what we learn and that which is out of our control to some degree, public health conditions. That has been the ongoing theme since the start. You've seen experts who have weighed in at one point saying you should do this and you shouldn't, and it's changed over the past few months. And so we have to be the models of that as an educational institution in support of our children. I mentioned equity and access. Again, some of those things that we have to attend to, not all, just a few, making sure that that technology is up and ready to go day one, and that we have a technical support hotline that's accessible and available to everyone, that regardless of what program our children are in, that they have access to meals. Nancy, who's on the line, did an amazing job with that last year, and it could be a little bit different. If we have two different types of educational programs, could be a little bit more complex, but we have to be ready and make sure that happens from day one. And then one of the things that my team has really been spending a little bit of time on recently and picking up is can we provide some level of support for students and families at school if the need exists for those families? Because again, when we have different situations where we have parents that are working, we have families with children that again are just a lot of small children, and they're trying to support them in that environment, or children with special needs that get special supports from trained people at school. We have a lot of different situations that an online learning environment is tough. It's tough on kids, and it's tough on parents, and it's tough on staff members. So how might we show better care and support for the students and the families in need? A lot of people have contributed to our planning. I won't go through all of them, but we've tried to listen to a lot of people. Been really grateful to have a number of people in the medical industry, some experts in infectious disease, who have helped inform and guide some of our thinking as it relates to our ability to keep our kids and families health and safe. We have, again, as a region of school districts, despite not all probably going to be on the same page, or at least not on the same page at this point for how we might start school, there's been some great collaboration at that end as well. And then, like all of us, most people were continuing to be informed daily, reading research daily related to the virus, and how not just schools, but other industries have lived with it in its settings, how they've responded to it, because it's not going away anytime soon. Hopefully it does, but doubtful. We broke our presentation, our school reopening plan, into 4 particular areas. My team will take it over at this point, focusing on healthy students, healthy staff, and healthy learning. So with that, I will turn it over to Pam. And Pam, just tell me when you want me to say advance, when you want me to advance the slide, please.
Thanks, Dr. Simpson. First of all, good evening to everyone. But on the slides, I think we're a little bit behind on what I'm seeing on my screen. I see the guiding principles slide. Can you hear me? Yes, okay.
That's what I was seeing as well, Pam.
Okay. There we go. So as you can imagine, we've been discussing this topic a lot. Healthy environments, cleaning and disinfecting will be a priority for the district if we open and have students in our classrooms. We'll be routinely cleaning those high-touch surfaces throughout the day, cleaning and disinfecting the bathrooms at an increased frequency. The buildings will be cleaned and disinfected each night. We're also going to ask everyone to help us out and minimize the soft furnishings, anything made of fabric in the classroom, so we can disinfect a little more thoroughly. And we're also going to work on minimizing the sharing of equipment and supplies. If there is some type of supply or equipment that has to be shared, we will work on disinfecting that between uses. Since if there are technology devices that have to be used at one class and then the switch classes in another group comes in, we will work to disinfect those screens and those keyboards before the next class comes in. Okay. So in the office areas, the reception desks, we're working to get either clear plastic shields or plexiglass on those reception areas, and also our classrooms where the teachers will have close contacts with students. We're looking to limit the number of visitors in the buildings. Visitors will have to make an appointment before they arrive. They will have to take a health self-assessment before they arrive, and then their temperature will be taken when they enter the building. We're also going to work on limiting the number of occupants in the restrooms at the same time. We'll put floor signs to mark social distancing throughout the buildings. We're going to keep that playground equipment closed, but the playground spaces will be open, and we're going to have those spaces used with cohorts so we can more easily do the contact tracing if need be. So we'll keep those same groups of students with their cohorts in the playground areas when they go outside. Some of the buildings are going to establish traffic patterns, and we'll have signage to direct the students and staff through the hallways. We're going to prevent drinking from the drinking fountains. The drinking fountains will remain open because we want people to be able to fill up their water bottle. We're encouraging everyone to bring a water bottle from home, but we will also provide water bottles if a student does not have one. We will look at limiting the number of occupants in a classroom and promote social distancing throughout the building. We'll have signage for things like hand washing, for reminding everyone from fourth grade on up to wear masks, to remind visitors to wear masks, to remind staff to wear masks. We will have hand sanitizer or sinks in the classroom, or sinks with soap and water in the classrooms. We'll have hand sanitizer at the entrances of the buildings and at things like entrances to the cafeteria, in the hallway, so that can be used frequently. We're also looking to either stagger meal schedules or have the students eat in the classrooms. I think right now, most of the elementary buildings are planning on the students eating in their classrooms instead of going to the cafeteria. We will work with our transportation vendors to make sure that the buses are disinfected on a regular basis. Our buses will also be equipped with disinfectant spray and wipes if that's needed to touch up areas. Mask will be required for all riders. It's a little bit different from in the buildings just because the students will be in closer proximity to each other. So we will want everyone to wear a mask. We will open the windows on the buses if weather permits. We're going to assign seats to maximum distance between students once we know which students will be riding the bus. We're also going to load those buses from the back to the front. So as students get in, they'll go to the back of the bus first and load going up to the front so that students don't have to walk past each other. And then just do just the opposite at the end of the day, where students will unload from the front to the back. And then we'll coordinate with our partner and transportation providers regarding all of the safety guidelines that the district has in place. Is John next?
I'm going to cover the area of healthy students that that we've put in place, and like we do all the time, we're going to ask our parents to partner with us. Our parents are key to a lot of the learning our students doing, and a lot that we'll do to keep our students safe. So we're going to ask our parents to do a healthy daily healthy screening for their children. Just as we're doing with staff now, it will be a self-assessment that we'll ask them to complete and submit every morning before their child or children come to school, to make sure that they're not exhibiting any symptoms of COVID or anything like that. And if they are, and this is again where we need the partnership of the parents, we're going to ask them to keep their child home, just for that child's safety and for the safety of everybody else who may be in the building. And as children, may get ill during the day, we are going to set up what we're calling precaution rooms. So we have our normal clinics, and our clinics, that our nurses operate, will continue to see students for healthy things like maybe taking daily meds, or maybe they've gotten a boo-boo and they need a Band-Aid or something like that. But then we're also going to set up precaution rooms. And these are going to be the areas that if a child gets sick during the day, we're going to ask them to stay in that area until their parent or guardian can come pick them up. And that way we're keeping the children who are not sick or exhibiting signs of illness separate from those who may be ill, just as an extra precaution. And then also we're going to put in a lot of measures where we're making sure that we know where kids are, where they're moving, restricting movement through the day, maybe having the teachers travel more than they have in the past, keeping kids in cohort groups or keeping them in their classroom. That way we can better account for if someone is sick, if someone does test positive for COVID, we can do the contact tracing and inform in as quick a manner as possible, and also respond as quickly as possible, and take the appropriate measures to make sure that that space is clean and so on. As John kind of stated in the beginning, one of the huge, largest areas that we'll be working with our children and our staff is in that area of social emotional learning. We will be working with Alive and Well communities this year. I think John has already talked to you a little bit about it. They'll be meeting with the principals later on this week to share more. And trauma training is just going to be key this year. Don't quote me on this figure, but I think I had read recently a study prior to the pandemic that something like 64% of people have experienced some level of trauma at some point in their lives. I'm sure that number is going to be so much greater as we continue to combat the pandemic and hopefully come out of the pandemic and sooner rather than later. So the trauma training that our staff will receive will be key to helping our kids grow and learn and be healthy. And so the way the trauma training will work is that we'll do a universal level of training for all of our staff. real early in the school year. And then each building, Alive and Well, will work with a trauma team from each building to further train them, who can then teach others in their building more about trauma, develop a plan specific to the needs of that building. And it's a 2-year commitment that we'll be doing with Alive and Well to provide these supports for our children. And also a large part of trauma training is not just working with our students who may have experienced trauma, but also our staff, making sure that they're staying healthy, both physically and mentally as they're tackling some of these tough topics. As John said, also, we're going to collect a lot of data to make us flexible and nimble in terms of making decisions and providing supports for students when it's needed. It's also going to help us treat trauma and anxiety, because I'm sure that a lot of our students may not have been in a structured environment since before last spring break. So for a number of months, they've not been in a formal setting. So we're going to make sure that children are feeling as comfortable as possible when they step into our buildings. And part of that is community building. I think one of the great things that we do in this district is fostering relationships with our children. We'll continue to do that, whether it is in an online format or whether it's in person or a combination of the two. And then a lot of this is also going to be educating our parents and engaging our parents about just some new routines that we're going to have in place. Some of those that Pam talked about with the mask wearing for children, intentional and frequent hand washing. Arrival and pickup is going to be looking different. Our uses of spaces are going to be different. We'll have signage throughout the buildings to make sure that people are socially distancing and so on. So that's it for me.
All right, hello everyone. So my next 2 slides that I'll talk about primarily is about healthy staff. And that's really been something that we have been focusing a lot on, understanding, kind of alluding to what John M. shared, that our staff as well as our students may be coming with some form of trauma. COVID has really presented itself to families in a lot of different ways. And so we know that, we understand that. There's a lot of conversation and dialogue going on right now about school and, can we open school? And what about our teachers, right? And so hopefully this pre-entry list that I have on this current slide is not all encompassing. However, did just want to list some points there for us to preview. We want to communicate and have a process for identifying the needs of staff. So each staff member, of course, some things have changed, life has happened, and so we will communicate a process out very shortly to them so that they can communicate with us and let us know what their current needs are and or what their needs will be when school starts. We are also going to make sure in each school we have a location that is identified, or multiple locations identified for people who are symptomatic. It is imperative that we're caring for our staff if in fact they become ill or something is occurring. Confidentiality in that care will be crucial. We will also provide COVID-related training. We did that before the 12-month staff. We actually did it for the custodians when they returned, and the maintenance staff. We did another training when more of the 12-month people returned, and we'll do an additional training with COVID-related topics for our staff whenever we come back. For what that looked like, this will be prior to reentry. We are currently working right now on a health and wellness program or process for teachers in particular, things that they can identify and see in the comforts of their home. Right before we get started, they'll be able to log into a Zoom or observe a video, just really to check in and ways to support them. Of course, we all know that there are new federal leave guidelines from the Family First Act. And so we did a roadshow when that first rolled out. And we'll do another one again for each location. We'll record it to make sure people have it. We want to make sure our staff are knowledgeable of what their leave rights are, what opportunities they have. that social and emotional learning, training, and supports, providing that throughout the year. So what's the comprehensive health and wellness program that we can offer staff? They can utilize it if they'd like or not. We, of course, always have those EAP services where they receive 5 free one-on-one counseling sessions if they'd like. It is completely confidential, as well as referrals to people who can support them during this process. Staffing is going to be huge. We're currently working right now to ensure that all of our regular or permanent positions are completely filled, but also staffing and making sure we have sufficient enough substitutes to support our students. DESE, from my understanding, is currently considering modifying the requirements to be a substitute. So once that definitively comes down and we get that information, that can better inform us and potentially widen our pool for substitute teachers. So we hired a good number of them on that last report. We're hiring some tonight. We still have a posting that's out there. We do have people who have applied as of today, which is good news. So we will continue to work sure that we have secured support with regard to substitutes. We have also in some buildings increased our everyday subs or permanent subs that we have in schools. So the hope is that that additional support will be helpful. And then of course, we will be constantly looking at our staffing needs per school, right? So what is currently happening in a school? Is there a number of teachers out? Do we have a number of teachers who may be out for matters that are not related to COVID? So we are currently running an analysis of all of our staff members who's certified, what areas do they have expertise in, just to make sure we can try and work and fill in gaps where we would need to. And then also remembering that, you know, COVID has really monopolized our brain, but it's really not the only thing that is impacting our staff, right? So what are some other possible things that we need to look for, be mindful of? We have a number of staff members who are expecting, you know, their babies, so we're excited about that. But that within itself can be nerve-wracking during this time, I'm sure. But we are, again, trying to be mindful of the full scope of what our teachers need, not just those matters related to COVID. You can advance it, John. The next slide talks about entry. And so the entry portion, I just still see the pre-entry one, John. I don't know if you wanna, I don't know why it's not advancing. Okay, great, thank you. So the entry, this is the point that staff are actually back in. So we will follow a similar process that we have currently with our staff members that are reporting to work each day currently. And one of those major pieces is a daily screening. John M. talked about it a little bit with the students, but we will ask our teachers to be mindful of those symptoms that have been identified by the CDC that are directly related to COVID. And so, you know, ask yourself, what's your temp? Do you have any muscle pains? You know, ask yourself those questions before reporting to work. We will encourage everybody, if you're ill, just to please remain home. You know, if you have, typically you have a migraine and you have a migraine on a Monday, just take a personal day like you would normally, right? If you are exhibiting symptoms that are not like your own person, I mean, we all know ourselves, and kind of when we're not feeling our best, we're asking you just to err on the side of caution and remain home. We will provide more guidance with that, but we are asking people to really utilize their medical professionals, their physicians and their doctors to help guide them on how they're feeling and what their best next steps should be. Again, we will have identified by that point locations for staff to isolate themselves if needed, if they do need to leave. Contact tracing is a huge process that we're undergoing right now in the HR office. We are going through the Johns Hopkins training that John has already been through. In addition, trying to establish a process, right? So that if someone contracts the virus, we can hopefully track their process, their progress to the school or location, and make sure that we talk to the necessary people that we need to. We will always reach out to the medical professionals for guidance, but we are going through that process and developing essential questions that we're asking staff members that need to be out. That COVID-related PD, we're going to provide that to all staff as they are hired, as well as we process through, because the virus has changed and has taken on a different perspective in some respects. So we want to make sure that we keep everyone mindful of what's current with the virus. Again, continuing to follow all of our leave guidelines. the communication from our staff is going to be crucial. So we are trying to figure out the best way. Things can get lost in email. What ways do we want to establish to set up to make sure we're effectively communicating with staff when something happens, just to keep them abreast of everything. And so that's what we have for healthy staff. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We know that beyond, in addition to.
Jason, you sound a little bit robotic to me. Does everybody hear him a little off?
Yes, he's.
Yes.
Yes, it's distorted.
Jason, you want to try again, or maybe jump in and jump off?
And sometimes it helps if you turn off your video.
There you go.
Can you hear me okay without the audio?
No.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I will attempt to do this without the video, just so that I can make sure that everyone can hear me clearly. So in addition to keeping everyone safe and healthy, we know that many are eager to hear more about what our educational programming for 2020 and 2021 will look like. I'm going to begin with walking you through the Webster Grove School District virtual program. This virtual program, which will be available beginning tomorrow for families to sign up for, will be a K-12 program that students will have the option to participate in. It will be a full day of online virtual programming. It will very much resemble a full school day, so all of the content areas. We will also have access to core courses and electives. Student learning will be assessed in addition to pre-assessments at the beginning of the school year, ongoing assessment in order to be able to determine how successful our students are being in terms of understanding and mastering the content. Based on feedback that we received from what occurred in the spring, we know that live instruction is very much a need for our community, and so we will be incorporating live virtual instruction through this virtual program. And what may be different than what occurred in the spring is that moving forward, participation is necessary for a student to achieve the attendance requirements, and grading policies will also apply to the work of the virtual program. In addition to the virtual program, we have a structure known as the District Responsive Learning Plan. The District Responsive Learning Plan has 3 different formats within that plan. Depending on where we are in terms of community transmission of COVID-19, in terms of the number of cases within a school, or in terms of a need to perhaps change due to staffing, we could be at any one of these points under the District Responsive Learning Plan. I'll begin by focusing in on the in-person learning component within the District Responsive Learning Plan. In-person learning will occur over 5-day regular school week. Students will come to school. Full in-person learning will take place within the school building. Within the classrooms and within the school building, we will follow all health and safety protocols, which could include face coverings, hand washing, sanitizing routines, and social distancing, many of the things that Pam mentioned earlier. Students will follow a consistent daily schedule that includes instruction in core content areas and modified and adapted electives. Student learning will be assessed to determine understanding and guide instruction. Once again, very consistent with what's offered in the virtual program. The in-person learning, the hybrid model, and the virtual learning component, assessment is going to be key in terms of identifying where our students are beginning the school year and the progress that they are making as we move through the school year. And once again, participation is necessary to meet attendance requirements, and grading policies will apply to in-person learning as well. Then we move to what we are calling our hybrid model, which is a combination of in-person learning and virtual learning. This combination will include 2 days of in-person learning with smaller groups of students and 3 days of self-directed virtual learning experiences. Students will follow, again, those 2 days when they are participating in in-person learning, all health and safety protocols, which again include face coverings, hand washing, sanitizing routines, and social distancing while they're in the building. Students will follow an A-B schedule for in-person learning based on the last name of each family. Student learning will again be assessed to determine understanding and guide our instruction. And again, participation is necessary to meet attendance requirements, and grading policies will apply to the hybrid model. The next format under the district responsive learning plan is the virtual learning component. You'll notice that what's listed under the virtual learning component and what's listed under the Webster Grove School District virtual program is very much consistent. The only option really is, or the difference is, that with the virtual program, families can choose to opt into that program at the beginning of the school year and stay a part of that program over a designated period of time. With the virtual learning option, there may be a need, depending on the level, again, of community transmission, staffing, et cetera, that everyone in the district may have to move to that full virtual learning format. However, I want to be clear that the level of programming under the virtual learning option and the virtual program that we are offering that families can opt into will very much be consistent with one another. All right, John, if we want to move to the next slide.
Before we move, Jason, will you just talk about the asterisk for a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. So John mentioned earlier that we are currently working to determine if we can provide in-person academic and social emotional support for students that we identify as in need of additional support. And so this could look like students who receive services for an individual education plan, an IEP, or students who may be, or families who may be in need of supervision for school-age students, depending on various family needs in terms of working families, et cetera, or students who have additional academic needs, such as reading intervention support, English language learning, et cetera. So we are still in the process of trying to determine if we have the capability of offering this option, perhaps as an addition to the hybrid model and also the virtual learning model, where students would not necessarily be in school all 5 days. So in a nutshell, how can we offer 5 days of adult supervision and support for students and families who need that option? So these next 4 areas are going to be true regardless of the format that we are in. So we will be pursuing each of these areas if we are in an in-person situation, if we are in the virtual program, or if we are in a hybrid situation, which is a combination of both. We know that a focus on building relationships between teachers and students is going to be crucial. It's been quite a bit of time since children have been out of school, and so that connection, whether it's in a virtual format or whether it's in person, is going to be necessary. We know that as a district and as schools, we have to be intentional about reaching out to students and families to create learning partnerships. We also know that we have to couple academic learning with the social emotional needs of our students and incorporate social emotional learning into our work, as John M. and Sandy both mentioned. We also know that regardless of the format of our work that we will be doing with students, it's going to be necessary to build community between students. So it's going to be important for the teacher and the student to have a relationship, but it's also going to be important for the students within the classroom, whether that's in an in-person classroom or a virtual environment, to build community amongst themselves. We will also design opportunities for student collaboration and sharing of learning. We'll have to be creative around what that can look like, whether it's in an in-person situation or whether it's virtual. We know that learning is social, And so how can we build opportunities for students to connect and to learn from one another? In terms of rigorous learning, in each content area and in each course, clearly defining our learning goals. So what are our outcomes for that particular course or that particular content area? The next bullet, again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's going to be crucial in our work with students to use assessments to identify learning gaps that students are bringing with them as a result of what we've experienced at the beginning of this year, and then to monitor their progress using assessments over the course of the school year. That's going to be crucial. Meeting students where they are individually. So once we know where individual students are as a result of that assessment information, then targeting individual plans and providing the best support we can to make sure that we are prioritizing the needs of all of our kids. Offering specific and timely feedback. We know that from much of the feedback from the spring, this was one aspect that we consider to be a growth opportunity for us. And so ensuring that, again, regardless of what format we are in, that we are offering specific and timely feedback to our students about their learning so that they can continue to make progress. And again, motivating students and incorporating their interests in every situation that we can, regardless, again, of the format that we are in. Within our learning environment, creating routines, procedures, and structures to support learning. And so this may look very different depending on the format that we are in. In an in-person situation, there are routines in terms of how we line up to go to the cafeteria, in terms of how we go to the bathroom. That's very much going to look different in an in-person situation this year. And we're going to have to take time to make sure that our students know those routines and know those procedures. The same is true in a virtual environment, knowing how to interact with the teacher in a live virtual instruction session. How do you raise your hand? How do you let the teacher know that you have a question or that you want to share an answer? Going through all of those procedures and those routines is going to be crucial. The use of Canvas as our consistent learning management system to support our work with students, that's going to be critical. Intentionally planning with student access in mind. And so as teachers are doing their work and planning their work and their level of engagement with kids, making sure that we are honoring the different levels of access that students have in terms of their learning. And then, of course, providing engaging learning activities and resources for students. In terms of learning for all, John mentioned this, that conversations around equity have very much been at the forefront of our mind. And so we know that we have to embrace a collaborative culture and focus on learning. And so when we say collaborative culture, that means partnering with one another within the school system, partnering with families, partnering with students, making sure that we are open to feedback so that we can continue to make progress so that we can ultimately prioritize the needs of each of our kids. Partnering with special school district to best serve students who have IEPs, and then providing individual learning support such as reading intervention, gifted education, English as a second language, students with 504 plans, etc. And then again, in-house within our district, using our collaborative learning team structure within each building to analyze our student assessment information, to talk about best practices that are happening, whether we're in a virtual format or whether we're in an in-person format. So continuing to use those structures to allow our staff, our teachers to collaborate and to problem solve with one another. In terms of providing professional development for staff, there are really 4 key areas that we are focusing on. The first is around what are best practices in K-12 virtual learning. And so what are the best ways to engage students in a virtual format in terms of sharing feedback with them or in terms of inviting collaboration amongst students? Continuing to explore all that Canvas, our learning management system, can offer. This will look very different depending on where we are in terms of the different format or the different structure that we are in, but being responsive and allowing our professional development to be as responsive as possible to support our staff with where they are. Also training and professional development around our health and safety practices and procedures. That's going to be crucial. And then again, focusing on mental health and wellness of our students and our staff as needed.
So, so what we kind of like I had shared earlier is that tomorrow we're going to send out some surveys and collect some information from families and staff and from some of our upper level students just to see where they are at this point with things, including from a parent perspective. Where do you stand with the virtual program? Is that something that you know you're going to want regardless or not? With staff, we're going to ask them questions about, you know, their work and their interest in where they stand right now with the virus and respect of coming back. We are going to, I communicated today, have some different community and staff Q&A sessions with different district leadership teams. We're going to offer 3 Zoom sessions for community, 3 Zoom sessions for staff. And then we're going to have a face-to-face, mask required, distancing required event at Moss Field on Thursday. Given what looks like a pattern of rain this week, if we can't meet face-to-face, and because of the timeliness of everything, we'll host a Zoom session for that as well. Our intention at this point is to plan to make our announcement on how we'll start July 29th. The message that has been communicated throughout, and we know it's very hard. It's not easy on us. We'd like to know how we are starting too. We have been encouraged by health department to delay our start, exactly how we'd start. But the virus has changed quite a bit and just how it's affecting our region, some of the thinking, some of the research as it relates to it. But our plan right now is to, by July 29th, with respect of both our families and their planning, our staffs and our planning, to make that announcement to our community. But along the way, as we've articulated, and anybody who watched any of the superintendent messages today or communications, leaving that caveat out there that we can pivot at any moment if we think it's in the best needs of the children and the people that we serve. So, and with that, we will open it up to questions and discussion. I'm sure there's a lot of things you're wondering about or would like to ask.
John, I have a couple of questions. And you kind of sort of went over it. I'm kind of more interested in more about the social emotional support for both the students and the staff. Like, how are you, what were some of the, I guess, ideas that were thrown out on how to more support students and staff regarding that?
Well, I would say some of the things that we learned from the spring, I think our counselors, our social work staff, as well as our teachers, tried as best they could to connect with people. And I think people that had established groups or connections or kids that they checked in did. I think how we are able to continue to, I think that monitoring piece is a critically important element because virtually it's hard to read. It's hard to connect online. It's harder to connect online on a phone than it is face to face. I think there's a lot that is said and communicated physically, not always verbally. You can see a child, how they feel, their mannerisms, and staff too, if you're walking the building and checking in with them. And it's just more complicated to do. So I think there has to be, like we said, there has to be those regular check-ins, those assessments that are done, and then that monitoring. And then also, last year, when we weren't hearing from students or they weren't engaging, we did check in with them, but there wasn't always like a structure for how we would do that. And John M. himself, Director of Student Services, would go to people's houses to try and connect and see why kids weren't engaging. But I think we have to have some better structures for that. And I do think that the work with Alive and Well, I think it's been something that we've been wanting for a while to do, move forward with as a district, pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, and to have school action plans that are developed prior to the start of school year with school-based leadership teams, and to have those experts who are walking with us through that, through the course of the year, adjusting those plans will be huge. And through Alive and Well, they also offer special development and training for staffs, small groups, whole staffs. And I think that'll be good.
Sports. I know this is any thoughts on sports?
Well, we with the county, one of the things that makes it so complicated is that you don't have health departments and local governments that are in alignment with one another. And so what sports looks like all over our region, outside St. Louis County, looks really different. As we know, I think, you've got baseball tournaments that have been going on, soccer tournaments in St. Charles for some time. We recently moved from a level 2 to level 1, and we adjusted our practices in-house based on the incidents and cases of COVID, and some of that, which is a spike in some of our younger students, our 10 to 19, that was attributed as a factor for that. So, if we're Misha has said that if we're in an all virtual environment as a school system, that you can't play sports, you can't have sports, but if you have an offering of anything that's not, you can. I personally, I think sports it was a huge part of my life. It's a huge part of a lot of people's life, not just sports, but like amen and a ladies, like activities too. But there's a lot of things that at this point, what we know about the virus being transmitted, I just don't know if from a competition standpoint that that's going to be doable. But so we're not saying no at this point, but I do wonder how it would be doable based on what we know.
And I just have one last question, just from my own personal experiences. I know that my girls, I guess they were very used to Google Classroom. So they did a couple of summer things and they were a little iffy on Canvas. And quite frankly, I was too. Would there be an opportunity maybe to make some more clarifying usage? I don't know, some sort of tutorials or something for Canvas to help? Because I've heard several people say that Canvas was a little more difficult than Google Classroom.
I'll let Jason or Tim jump in there.
Yeah, so absolutely, beyond providing continuous development for our staff, knowing that regardless of what format we're in, we're going to have to provide support for families in terms of navigating Canvas, and also providing support for our students in terms of those procedures and those routines that I talked about. A lot of how to maneuver and navigate through Canvas will be very much a part of that. So, but also providing tutorials, and part of what we've built into our Canvas design are sections for family supports that Canvas has already developed, but then we are also looking at creating supports that are Webster specific for our families and how we are going to go about using Canvas.
That would be very helpful and awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
You bet.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. What are you looking for from us this evening? Are you looking for approval of the various, not a quote unquote approval of the various options, a recommendation as to how we, opinions actually, as to how we start, or what can we give you?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I would love your reaction to the plans. If you're feeling one way or another, you can certainly share that, but definitely your reaction to the plans. I think as the Board of Education, you getting, a little bit more details, the overview at first, and we're going to put out to the community. I think it's important for you guys to weigh in and to do so publicly. So thank you for asking.
So now that you've given me permission, I'd really like to
Please.
Careful what you wish for, right? So first of all, thank you for the comprehensive plans, plural plans. There are several options here. And when I try to find some perspective all of this, it helps me to think that where we start may not, hopefully will not be where we finish, right? And so I think it's important to make a decision about what we're going to do on August 24th. And I have strong opinions on that, which I will share in a moment. But regardless, this is a fluid situation. And so I'm very encouraged that we've thought out, I'm not taking any credit for this, you've thought out all possible scenarios. And so I feel really good about that. I also feel really good about the fact that whatever, whether virtual is the only option or an option, that it's going to be better than it was before. No disrespect. We had to all come together. Again, I don't know why I'm taking credit. You all had to figure it out at the last minute. Yeah. And so we did our best, but we all know we can do better.
Yep.
So then in terms of, I'm in terms of how we start, I look at a lot of the plans, and I appreciate the efforts to, have kids socially distance and to wear masks. But I also ask myself, particularly when we're talking about young kids, is that a realistic expectation for our teachers to manage that on top of everything else that they have to manage? And then more importantly, given that we can't control what people do when they're not in school, I'm very concerned with the virus levels where they are right now, that opening in person at all is going to put our teachers in a really unfair position of having to choose between their jobs and their safety. And I'm just not comfortable with that. I wish it weren't the case. I wish that we were still where we were in May and the numbers look different, but they don't. And I say that as a parent of a kid with special needs, with a vision impairment, who needs in-person service, and a full-time working mom who knows how hard it is to take care of kids and try to do your job and make a living. So I know that I'm not saying this lightly, but I also keep thinking about, we lost 2 teachers in March and the numbers weren't what they are now. So I just don't feel like in good conscience I could ask anybody to risk their life or their health by going back. Right now, again, where we start hopefully won't be where we finish.
Thank you for sharing.
Amy, can I add one of my questions to that? Because I was thinking of those 2 teachers and then knowing that the first 2 or 3 deaths that happened in this community were related to Webster Groves, including the nurse who used to come into Steger. And John, I know this is an impossible decision and there's no right answers, and this system is changing every day, as Amy mentioned, but can the district postpone reopening the schools until conditions in St. Louis County make it safe to do so? And then my further question to that is, do we have established criteria that will allow us to know when it's safe?
We have the right to, postpone school, to the length that we need to, as long as I don't know what all the specific rules are. Amy might know more than I do with that, but I think you can, you had to start prior to a certain or after a certain date that was waived, so school districts could start sooner. But there was no cap necessarily, I don't think, on when you could start later. So we do have that option going in either direction. Different districts, universities, you're seeing different things. Some are starting sooner, trying to end by Thanksgiving, feeling like the virus is going to peak more in the wintertime. Others may be starting a little bit later. I haven't heard of that necessarily, but in terms of metrics, that's something that we have been, we've talked about a number of times. We talked about it again last week as a superintendent group, and we are really trying to encourage the county health department to help us with that. None of us are experts in this, in the medical, in the infectious disease or anything. And we've gotten some support along the way, but also we feel like overall we're still having to do too much in some areas that we really, again, don't have the expertise on. We're all learning a ton. So we are going to be this week looking at metrics that some states have been utilizing for making determinations of when they most often move between levels of programming, kind of like we had those three. When do you make the decision to move? When do you not? So hopefully we can be more quantitative in that decision. That's what we're shooting for. We received an article that some are using. Let me see if I had that here. So one is a sustained 2-week drop. There's kind of a combination, a sustained 2-week drop in cases, low number of daily new COVID cases, high coronavirus testing capacity, a low test positive rate, and the availability of ICU beds. Those are some determinants that some places are using. So hopefully we'll come up with that soon. That's what we'll be looking to do as a school, as a region. That's a question we all have, you know.
Hey, John, just to back up a little and maybe just to get this question out there, it's probably the one that might be the softball question, if you will. But just to be clear, there's really two options we're talking, right? Even though the one has several different components
Correct.
to it, it's basically an all virtual program or a district responsive learning plan, which could be, which is basically going to be a hybrid approach.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. I want to say it's one thing again that makes this decision. It's just very complex because, you know, regardless of what you decide, kids are going to be harmed. You know, they're going to be harmed academically. The data shows that from our last 2-week closure, data that was shared through a research institute with regional superintendents is that 4th grade students in the 2-month closure test they're anticipating it's going to take 6 months to catch them up. For 6th grade students, it's going to take, in math, it's going to take 14 months to catch them up. Now, all of our virtual programs in most public school systems nationwide weren't at the level they're going to be in the fall, but we know that in person is a better experience. The thing that I think it was Amy who shared, a complicated thing is that I've had the true privilege to, and my team has, connect with some medical experts and some experts in infectious disease, some who have been, you know, referenced and communicating in papers, are in the paper, and they know this stuff better than anybody. They know this stuff better than like health department. And so, I mean, they've studied this. This is what they live and breathe, right? And they feel really comfortable that, and again, not comfortable that we can, if we apply certain practices to our schools, that we can reasonably expect to keep people safe. And the big game changer that they're all saying is mask usage, mask wearing. It's a game changer. And when you look at criteria now to identify as a close contact, it's within 6 feet without a mask. So the mask is a real big deal. They're not so concerned about people walking in hallways as long as they have masks on, regardless of how close they get. The challenge, some of the challenges, a lot of challenges, a lot of complexity. One, because of course, you know, we are a different business and industry than a lot of those that I get, and most respectfully so, sent to me, in terms of healthcare, in terms of casinos, in terms of a grocery store. Because while we have adults that are in our schools, we are overwhelmingly children. And children are playful, children are curious, and children will experiment. Not as much in our setting. Now, that said, I feel like our kids would do a really good job, and if we set the expectation for them and wearing their masks. I do. I believe that they, as a group, have more care for the world than adults do. Full disclosure. But that said, that's what the concern is, even with these experts, aren't about our ability to do what we can do in-house. It's what we're seeing out in our communities. I think Amy said it's what's happening in the communities, and with people not having respect for social distancing, not wearing masks at times they need to wear them, and the such. Because one of the things that's really hard, as you know, as if is somebody, and we've all known people, if we haven't been there ourselves, who have had to go on quarantine because there's been some level of close contact with somebody who's had it. Well, in some industries, it's not difficult to have somebody substitute or fill in. In ours, as great as our subs are, which our sub pool is understandably diminishing, and it is regionally, it's not easy to step in for a second grade teacher who knows all those kids if they're face to face. It's not easy to step in for an AP physics teacher to teach for up to 14 days, and possibly longer if they live with somebody who's actually a case, who actually has it, because that just extends the period of time that they're out. So there are so many different factors that we have to consider. And so it does make it a little bit challenging, but I did want to throw that out. And again, huge kudos to all the people in our community, the doctors, some of whom are parents, who have really helped us out with this, helped think through this.
John, I've got a series of questions, if that's okay.
Please.
First, I don't know, maybe you or Sandy one wants to talk about if and how teachers have been involved in sort of developing these options, because I think that's important for us and for the community to hear.
Yeah, I will, for the teacher, I'll jump in on that. We have a district issues group that is comprised of teachers from around the district, representative of the schools. And we have most weeks since we stopped school have been meeting for approximately 30 minutes to an hour on Zoom to discuss the plans and the reopening. They've given a lot of thought, a lot of input, a lot of advice. They've received the same level of information that district administrators have, who have also been on such calls on a weekly basis. I also recently, and Sandy and I have both, and my cabinet has been on those calls when they've been able to meet, make it. Sandy and myself have each been interacting with the one of the district union leaders, just to answer questions and connect with them and talk with them about the start of the year. We surveyed staff. We had 374 respondents. It wasn't just teachers, but it was all staff in May and June, and we're getting ready to put something out again. So we feel like we've been connected with the teachers along the way.
Good. Another question for you. In most of these plans, we've been talking about K-12. Can you speak to the preschool and sort of what the plans are for Ambrose if they're connected to any of these options?
Yeah, we listed Ambrose in the responsive learning plan. You'll note on that little graphic, it's pre-K-12. One thing that's important to note, and I don't remember if Jason did, is that we could make the decision to start some levels differently than others. What the experts certainly would tell you is that you can, as far as the younger children, their rate of transmission, their rate of getting the virus is really, 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 really small compared to older children and adults. So we are, haven't finalized plans at this point for the Ambrose. One thing that makes it would make it a little bit easier to start programming there is just given the size of the classes and having 2 adults in the room. Again, if one adult wasn't present for any reason, you have another one right there who knows the children, who knows the plan. They collaborate really well. So a decision hasn't been made, but we're looking, like with all things, to make that decision real soon so families can plan.
Great. And I think you answered one of my other questions. So you're saying that if we do choose that responsive learning plan, then different buildings or different grades could be in different places on the plan, right?
Right. When we come out and make our declaration where we're going to start, it could be everybody's in the same setting, the same format, or it could look different for different levels. We're reserving that right to be able to do that. And again, a lot of that, thinking through all the factors that I mentioned. I won't reiterate.
Yeah. Okay. And then it was sort of mentioned briefly, but can you speak a little bit to, and maybe this is for Dr. Adams, but for the gifted program? I think that was listed with the IEPs and some of those that you guys are still working that out. Is that right? If that can be offered online?
Jason, do you want to talk about those programs?
Sure. So what I briefly mentioned was the ability to perhaps provide supervision during the school day for students who may need access to additional learning supports with an in-person situation. And so that could be reading intervention, it could be gifted, could be English as a second language. That is happening. At the same time, our plan is very much to still provide those programs through the virtual format. And so if a child participates in the virtual program and they also receive gifted education services, or they also receive reading services, we will very much have the capability to provide those services virtually as well.
Okay. Then I think my last question, sorry for taking up so much time, guys, but I think my last question would be, and maybe John, you or Pam, are there budget implications for one plan versus the other? Can you speak to budget implications for these things?
Yeah, Pam, do you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. There's obviously a lot to consider when we look at that, and there are a lot of uncertainties when we look at what the cost will be. So if we're in person, if we have students in the building every day, or the hybrid and they're there just part of the time, as you can imagine, we're going to have a large increase in PPE and disinfecting solutions and equipment to disinfect the classrooms. The plexiglass barriers, signage, all those kinds of things. Some of those things which we've already purchased to start being prepared for the start of the school year. When I add all of that up, usually be if we continue, if we have students that come to school that need a mask and we have to give them a mask, we could be looking at $200,000 to $250,000 just on things for cleaning and face coverings and things like that. Another thing we've talked about a lot is staffing. So our goal will be to maintain staffing levels, but until we see some of the numbers on what everyone selects, it's going to be, oh, now I'm getting a message, my internet's unstable, so hopefully you can still hear me. We'd like to keep those staffing levels consistent, but on some of those options, we won't know for sure who signs up for what, and if we are able, once we do our research and provide supervision for students on the days that they're not doing instruction, what that will look like. The one thing, if we're in school, that we're still analyzing our custodial staff to make sure we're going to be sufficient in that area so they can do all of the deep cleaning and disinfecting that needs to be done. So there could be an additional cost there. And then when we look at how we're paid from the state, we're paid on our average daily attendance. So that is our percentage of attendance for our students. So if you're here 95% of the time, your ADA is 0.95. So when we look at that, and I heard the superintendent from Jennings this morning talking about their summer program and how they've had about 50% of their students not there, because obviously right now, if you're not feeling well, we want you to stay home. So our absentee rate is going to increase. Now, it may not be 50%, that's a summer program there, not the regular school year. But if I look at that and just say, okay, so let's say our ADA is going to decrease by 25%. I have no idea if it'll be 25% or 10% or 50%, but that's about $1 million in revenue that we will lose. So just to kind of give you an idea of where that stands. So there are other areas like we could save, if we're virtual, we could save on transportation. but we might have more expenses on the food service side that will kind of even each other out. So I know that was a lot of information, not a concrete answer to your question, but I hope that at least kind of points you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. That's helpful just as we think about, it's like everything else, right? There's so many unknowns that we don't know yet. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Well, I think like Pam articulated, like we always work to keep kids at the center of all of our decision making. But as an organization, sometimes that you have to consider things like your finances. I mean, we have to, right?
Yep.
And still keeping the focus on kids, but what does $1 million do? The loss of $1 million do to your organization based on a decision that you make in terms of the programming. So again, this is the most complex thing that I've ever dealt with in this position or any position in education, just because all these competing forces and competing cares, I would say.
Yeah, I felt even a little icky asking the question about the budget because really, the safety of our students and their education are really what we need to be concerned about, but budget is also part of that. So
sure is.
It just reminds me as a society, I think for decades, we've put more and more of the social services onto our school system. And this is just another reminder to me how that has just continued to unfortunately happen. And it's coming to a head here in sort of ways that aren't great for the kids that we're trying to educate in this scenario, which is really unfortunate because of the failures of the system up the line over the last decades.
So true. Thank you.
For that.
Hey, John. One other question I have is Adventure Club. I know that you had some plans for that, obviously, but just curious if you could speak to that a little bit. And then, obviously, given the staffing concerns, I know staffing for that's always difficult. So, just your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, again, thinking of our families and our families' needs, our intent is that we have kids in our schools, that we would work to try and provide that support. And a focus is, if we're in school, that we would be cohorting kids to the level that we can. It's much simpler to do the younger we are. It gets more complex the higher we go. So, but we would have to try and as best we can. So for example, at a school like Edgar Road, we would have to try and find an Adventure Club staff member and put that person with a certain group of students that those are their people, and they're with those same 7 or 8 kids every single day, and they're on the playground together, and they're in whatever space or room together. Again, not as concerned about the transmission for the younger, but we're going to be really, really mindful of that all the way around. So it is complex with staffing at the Adventure Club, which is typically a more transient group, given the hours that it holds. And we've increased pay in recent history. But that's kind of what our intent is. I will say that we've also thought about, because one thing that we're mindful of too, with these different programs and services we offer, we have people that are paying for their livelihoods with the jobs that we have. And in some of these models, those jobs don't exist. Those jobs don't exist. And we've thought, if even for would there be, because again, feeling like we could keep people pretty safe if we're masked up and doing the right thing, could that be a possible use of Adventure Club staff to help support smaller cohorts of kids, to support what we're doing in the schools or support families in some way? So we're trying to be really creative with how we think about their use. But in terms of the program as it is, if we're in person, we're still going to try and use it, and we're going to try and create cohorts. But it's going to be a burden on families, because as some of you have experienced with Adventure Club, again, sometimes the transient nature of the staff. And so, sorry, that's a little bit around answer.
No, thanks.
John, a couple of thoughts that I've had as I've been listening. I know that little ones can still transmit the virus. And if I heard correctly, it was that kids 4th grade and up would be encouraged to wear masks. So if I'm in an elementary school, it sounds like 2/3 of the kids who are coming into the building would not have on masks. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that's something we continue to talk and debate about that even today. Some districts are moving to the K-12. Right now we haven't moved there. We can do it. Again, people that know a whole lot more than us are saying that they wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But that's something that we might still do. And, we'll see what the communities, we don't have a question related to that on the community survey, but I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments too regarding.
So John, sorry, Christine, can I interrupt for just 1 second? I apologize. Christine said we'll be encouraged to wear masks. Is that what it's going to be? Or are we actually going to tell students you have to wear masks and that is a requirement to be in class?
4th grade and up will be a requirement. Below then, students will be encouraged, it won't be a hard press, so to speak, but they'll be encouraged to do so. On buses, we have them having to wear masks, but it won't be right now in our plans. It's not mandatory below the age, below 3rd grade and below. The line where the experts, and when you look at their research, it's 10 to 19 is the group. And that falls they kind of consider that almost in like the young adult group, like the 20 and above. So we made the decision, since children go from 9 to 10 in 4th grade, most, not to just say 10-year-olds, once you hit 10, like here's your mask, here's your pencil in the office, just to be consistent, all the 4th graders.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
May I make another comment?
Sure.
So I just wanted to add, to answer that question earlier about the financing too. I think I neglected to say that ADA is calculated. We take the average or not the average, we look at the last 3 years. So it would take a couple of years for that effect to hit us if our ADA doesn't go back up. And I think I neglected to add that point in there. So it would not necessarily affect us for next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. I was really encouraged by hearing Kita's question, and I know Joe and I, and maybe even Kita, have heard about Alive and Well in the past, and I'm really glad we're bringing that in. Several of us had gone to a leadership Missouri School Board Association meeting over the summer, and John's right. I think what we heard was that 7 out of 10 are struggling with mental health. And out of that 7 out of 10, 80% are feeling uncomfortable in asking for help. And so this kind of wraparound programming will help them, because we know that everybody coming into campus, whether they're choosing the virtual or whether they're showing up and having to deal with the uncertainty of what's going on, that they're coming in with trauma.
100%.
I had another question, and that is about the model. And so the WGSD virtual program, will that be taught by Webster teachers?
Jason, you want to answer that?
Sure. Yes, it will.
Okay.
So as part of our survey process for staff, we will be offering the option for folks to share an interest in participating in that.
Thanks, Jason. And then about the responsive learning plan, is there any way to know where that starts in August? Or do we, as parents, plan for virtual learning and then hope for the best? Or if that's the best, then hope for I don't know. But
No.
you know where it starts.
Yeah, so that is what we're going to look to determine and try and announce on July 29th of which spot we're starting along that responsive learning plan. It's not a choice, and we could do something different for different levels. But kind of like Alex said, you're either choosing the virtual plan or you're kind of agreeing to go this way with the district, whichever way they choose for the in-person learning or the hybrid or the virtual learning. It is possible that we are all virtual. That's a possibility. based on that plan. And again, like Amy said earlier, the hope's to, again, navigate that to get all of our kids back. I mean, that's our hope, to get them back as soon as we possibly can. The one thing that I want to add to Jason's response in terms of the virtual learning program is that you, because we don't know where the children are going to come from, meaning we don't know how many second graders from Clark are going to sign up or how many fourth graders from Avery. We don't know, we're not going to guarantee it's not going to be necessarily a teacher from your home school that's teaching your class, and you're likely going to be in a mix of kids from different grade levels. That's more than likely going to occur, unless the numbers are such that it lines up perfectly. If the numbers line up, we'll try to make it happen where everybody's got a teacher from their home school. But we'll just have to wait to see what people declare. That's also the case when we're looking at middle and high school level teachers. Again, we're all busy and going to be busy doing a lot of things, but I know Sandy has already been looking at different certifications of people, just to make sure we could have some middle school teachers that may be teaching a high school class, and we could have some high school teachers that are teaching a middle school class online. So just have to be flexible.
John, any thoughts on electives if it's virtual? Band, art, things like that.
Yeah, Jason, do you want to talk? Oh, sorry, Keita. Oh, sorry.
Well, I just have a quick comment after that. He can answer first, and then I'll make a quick comment.
Okay.
Sure. So I've been involved in several conversations with curriculum folks from across the county, and many of us are struggling with the idea of orchestra, choir, and those particular electives. And so our goal is very much to provide what we can. It's very much going to depend on which format of the distance learning responsive plan that we are in. And so some folks are looking at requiring masks during choir performances. Some districts are not engaging at all. Some are encouraging folks to go outside whenever possible and socially distance whenever the weather permits. And so we don't have a definitive answer on that just yet, but we are continuing to look at that and have conversations with what other people are doing regionally related to those areas.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. My comment is about the kids kindergarten through third. I'm a little concerned that, and I get that they're small kids, but the point is they're small kids and they're the ones who wipe their noses with their hands and they touch everything and they cough and they don't cover their sneezes. Even though they're at a lesser risk, they go home to people who are at a greater risk. So I would feel a lot better if we stick to something more so like making it mandatory for them as well. Now there's also an issue because they're smaller kids who've been keeping up with things, but I don't know, and I would be concerned if I were a second grade teacher and my kids were not required to wear a mask. I personally would love to see that we maybe require it of them as well, because they might be doing great, but like I said, they go home or the teacher they can still transmit, like Christine said. So they might be doing great, but they might make other people sick. So they go home to older brothers, parents, grandparents. They go to the store. You know what I'm saying? I would encourage us, strongly encourage us to make it mandatory for the smaller kids as well.
Thank you.
I'm curious what kind of feedback you are getting from the teachers. I think I'm kind of in Amy's camp of thinking that we're putting our teachers in a really bad position and asking them to come back, especially knowing that some of them are likely in the high risk category. What feedback are you getting from them? What is their comfort level?
I haven't, with the district issues committee, there hasn't been a lot of reservations necessarily about coming back, but they want to make sure that there is in a safe environment as possible. I think, when, they've presented with some of the research and some of the experts' opinions on it. So I do think there are, to say that, now that's one group. I would say that there are definitely a number of people that have reservations about coming back for a variety of different reasons. I would say that there are people that wonder how they would do in-person teaching based on, again, possibly their own mental health, where they are at the moment, based on, where are my children in school and what are they supposed to be doing right now? And are they okay? And people thinking about if it's an online virtual program, how am I going to do this again? Like I had a teacher who's got like 3 or 4 children and they're all under the age of 7 and the youngest is 1, wondering, you know, how is she going to do this online teaching again? Because it didn't really go that well for her in the spring, and it kills her because she cares a lot about her kids, but it's really hard to do. So I think, you know, we'll get the survey results. I'll share the results with you. You'll get to see their feelings at this point in the year. I hear from people who want to come back, who are saying, I'm ready to come back if we go back. But I would say definitely there's a lot of still apprehension. So again, we'll get a good pulse, a strong pulse on that with this latest round of assessment.
It just seems hard because students have the option, or families have the option to do virtual if they choose, but teachers don't necessarily have that option. So
that's true. I'll tell you one thing that we are going to do is we are going to working with some of these experts to provide an opportunity for our staff to talk to the experts. I think you read stuff, like sometimes people will hear like, well, this person in county government said, and they're like, oh, this person said this. And it's like, you know, so to provide the opportunity for everybody to have access to some of the information and the people who are heads of this at like some pretty prominent places would be reassuring, would be helpful. Now, again, not saying that these people are saying that you should come back, but just being more aware of COVID-19, what is known at this moment, knowing that people are learning, and what you can do to keep yourself safe, I think will provide a lot of people with a lot of comfort. What option they choose may not sway that, but I think it would make people more comfortable. So we're going to try and do that. We're going to try and create opportunities for a video connection. And then we're also working to develop some type of FAQ where staff can share their own questions, and it'll be answered by one of these experts, and it'll kind of be on a living document.
sounds good.
Sorry.
I've got a couple of questions, if I can.
To that, and that's just, I hope that someone will address. I think everyone that is commenting constantly focuses on the mortality rate, but the other factor is we know that there's people that will have chronic lung issues and other issues as a result of COVID. So I hope that when we're asking these experts that we're not just looking at, yes, it's a small percentage of children that actually get sick and die, but it's a bigger percentage that may have lifelong issues related to it. Anyway, just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe, for saying that.
So if I could ask just a couple of questions. First, obviously, when we put everybody back into when we started off with the distant learning at the end of last school year, this was something that was new to everybody. Can you talk a little bit more about training that you're going to provide for teachers who are providing those lessons? I mean, my sense was that it was sort of so radically new for everybody that that was difficult. And I know the teachers want to do the best that they can. And so what can you talk, I know you've talked a little bit about the resources you can provide, but if you could perhaps go into a bit more detail about that for me.
Sure. So earlier this summer in June, we rolled out a training course that's roughly 12 hours long around Canvas, and for how each classroom teacher, each specialist, including our special educators, can develop their course. And so as part of that, we showed them the key areas within their Canvas template. We've also developed that Canvas template so that it looks consistent for families as well. And so as part of this 12-hour course, at the end of the experience for this course, we are then surveying our teachers as a natural extension of the course around what additional areas that they would like to see and feel like they need continued learning in. And that information is how we are guiding our back to school work that we will be doing in August related to Canvas. And so trying to use their feedback based on their initial experience to then guide additional training that we will be providing. A lot of the training that we will be providing will be through tutorial videos, will be housed on YouTube so the teachers can access them at any time. Tim Brown has also offered drop-in sessions every Wednesday, I believe, in July and August. I think Tim can speak to this, but I believe our last session that he offered, we had roughly 40 to 50 teachers who joined, where he is answering all kinds of individual questions about Canvas, and he's there as a consistent support for folks who the video isn't quite clear or they just have questions and want to know more. And so we very much plan to continue to do that work as we go throughout the beginning of the year. Obviously, depending on how we start the year for everyone, the plan for professional learning will look different. If we are in a situation where everyone is beginning with virtual programming, we won't spend as much time at the beginning of the year focusing on health and safety within the school building and those procedures and those structures, knowing that if and when we move to that situation, we'll have to provide that work. If we start in a situation where we are all in person or we are in a hybrid situation, trying to balance some of those virtual components of our professional development with the health and safety components as well. And so a lot of it will be dependent on which direction we end up moving. While I said that, at the same time, folks who are going to be leading and teaching within our virtual program, getting the full extent of what that can look like at the beginning of the school year so that they can begin to develop a consistent program K-12 within our virtual program. I hope that answered your question. So a lot of what we'll be focusing on will be what our best practice is. How do we share feedback with students? What are opportunities that we can use Zoom and other formats to engage students with one another in a virtual environment? How do we grade? How do we provide small group instruction at our lower levels for individual students? And so really looking at what we do in an in-person environment and what are ways through a virtual environment that we can recreate those experiences and providing that support for our staff. And I can't say enough about the work that Tim Brown has done in terms of putting together almost a library of virtual resources for staff, but then also making himself available to support staff as well.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the things that was missing, and so I appreciate at the start, you know, the acknowledgement that things didn't go or that there's room for improvement. And I think certainly from a lot of the parents that I have heard from, you know, the recognition it wasn't a great experience. If we're going to go through this again, it's something, I think a lot of the angst about we've got to have our children back is because they didn't feel that the experience their children got was that strong, and they're very concerned that their children are learning. And so everything we can do to ensure that if we're doing the online learning, it's a more meaningful and it's a more rigorous experience, and also it's one that all children can share in the same way. I'm very concerned that, again, I mean, this is something where if you've got access to better resources, you are going to have better outcomes with this. And it's even just as simple as, you know, your Wi-Fi and things like that. But in terms of the actual teaching, can you talk, are you going to have administrators or principals or people, heads of department sitting in on lessons? I know you said you were going to be measuring the success. I know you said that you were going to go back to you know, students, parents, you know, on sort of every sort of 4 weeks or so and get a sense for how things are going. But more than that, are you going to have people sitting in on lessons and really observing how things are going? And just because it's such a new environment, anything we can do, it strikes me, to improve the quality is going to alleviate a lot of concerns that I'm hearing from parents about the education of their children.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for sure. It was something that, again, was an expectation last spring, but it probably didn't get the attention it deserved as people were trying to again connect with kids, take care of basic needs, and just kind of figure out the whole online learning. But there will be, you know, the teacher evaluation system will be up and running, and you know, we'll be expecting principals to be in virtual classrooms, if that's the setting, to the same level that they are the other, and especially up front. You know, again, coming out of the gate with our expectation, a raised expectation for the live interactive learning every day, not just a single experience, but for, you know, a significant portion of the day, we have to do that. And I know our teachers are going to do it, but we need to make sure principals are in there supporting them and encouraging them and monitoring that too.
Just one other, well, actually just a couple of quick comments. I was encouraged to hear that about the requirement to participate. I think one of the things that was sort of missing last time round, those who wanted to be involved would be involved. Those who tend to get distracted, who aren't going to, it was difficult, and it's hard for parents then who are saying, you know, just to sort of go and make those things happen. So the requirement to participate is one that I think is very good. I would suggest that you actually want your principals to be, or somebody sitting in on lessons more than they would do on regular classroom, because the teachers know what's going on in the regular classroom. This is so new that the opportunities for peer, you know, for sort of peer development, for supporting, for mentoring, are probably much greater here. So to the extent you've the resources, and you have the resources to go and put more sort of bodies in rooms and in lessons to see what's going on and to provide advice and support, the better.
Thank you.
Hey, so actually, kind of on that same note, we've actually been using Canvas over the summer, and I'd say probably a different opinion than Keita. For us, it has been a little bit easier, but I think maybe it could be that the older kids might just be more familiar with the Google platform, and the younger kids were not familiar with any platform, and or teachers. But one of the things I kind of had on that note really was it's still time consuming for parents, especially with younger children, K through, I don't know, 2, 3 maybe. And so even just helping them turn on the computer or do little tasks that people think are so easy that, you know, a younger child won't know. So is there going to be something that goes out that just talks to the commitment from parents for families with 1, 2, multiple young children, and the amount of time and the expectations of those parents?
That's a good suggestion. That's a good suggestion, Alex. That's something that I personally haven't thought about. But we could discuss that.
Okay.
John, I have hopefully my last question. Alex, were you done? I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes.
And I think you may have mentioned this, but I'm sorry, I may have gotten sidetracked. Is there a number? So if, I don't know, 5 kids or staff members test positive, is there like a number or some kind of benchmark that we're looking at where we would shut the schools down if our personal numbers start to get, God forbid, high, or whatever that might be?
We don't have any set of numbers now, and that's one of the things that we're trying to get the health department or officials to help us with. because we don't have a particular metric that would lead us in different directions. You know, and there are health department measures, and then there are also school district measures that we have to utilize to be able to fluctuate. And I think I gave the example, maybe not, of just the staffing situation. And, you know, if you have a number of staff that are having to quarantine and they're away from their students for an extended period of time, if they're in a virtual environment and they're not, you know, certainly if anybody who's symptomatic, we don't want them working, they need to take care of themselves. But if asymptomatic, then, and their kids are in the classroom at a school, it's going to be quite challenging to support those kids for up to 14 days while their teacher's out, or if they're virtual, it'd be a lot easier. So we're looking for those metrics. We're going to create them if they're not given to us to help us determine how to make those particular decisions.
Thank you. You did mention, I couldn't remember. You also mentioned like if the school gets 5, we're done. Like I didn't know if that was, but you did mention that. So.
Yeah, and it's so much. Again, I took that course and have spoken with a lot of these people, and I do want to say that these people all work in settings with children in some pretty well-respected places. So they're not just researchers, you know, in some classroom or some office. They're in settings with kids who have some pretty significant medical needs. But kind of with the whole, you know, and maybe you all know this, but certainly some of you do, but you know, who ends up going into quarantine? In the past, it used to be, you know, somebody was exposed and the whole classroom for sure, or the whole school, or the whole whatever just kind of shut down, and they stopped and they cleaned and everyone had to go home for all these. And that's not what the practice is at this point. You know, it's how do you identify who were the people that were the close contacts? Now, if you don't have the ability to do that well, then you have to shut everything. If you can't guarantee who were the people that were the close contacts, then you got to shut it all. So that's why I think maybe some of those states, like I listed earlier, they have some different metrics that they use. But that's going to be really important, Keita, and to have something that we use instead of having to debate it and think about it. It'd be helpful, and it'd be helpful for parents and families to know that, and you all.
Thanks, John. That actually reminded me of my first question, and I think maybe I didn't ask the question correctly. So I was talking about, could we postpone reopening schools, and not necessarily postpone school, but postpone opening the buildings.
100%.
And you know, I think that would solve 2 things. It would help teachers better prepare and know what they're preparing for, but it will help parents better prepare for where we're going to start as well. Because it's hard for me as a parent to think about what kind of decision I might be able to make if I don't know where we'd even be starting within that sort of 3-phase plan.
Yeah, and that's what we hope to come out of the gate on the 29th and announce. You know, this is where we're going to start, and there will be a caveat all the way through that it could shift and disrupt people and disrupt teachers and disrupt. But again, three weeks ago, there were a lot more people that were, you know, feeling a lot better about, you know, where the status of the virus was, and that's shifted in 3 weeks. And I think you've seen that in some of the people. Now, like a number of the school districts came out today and they did something similar to us. Well, here's kind of our plan, and we'll put a pin in where we're going to start. 2 options, like Alex said, we'll put a pin where we're going to start on this one at a later time. But some people came out and declared, and again, it's continued to evolve. It's a hard thing, but we definitely can do that. And it's something we're going to have to consider.
Yeah, and maybe I jumped the gun, but just to be clear, that's what I was advocating for.
Yeah.
I know Rittner's one that has already said virtual only to start, and then we'll see where it goes.
Okay, I did not hear that about Rittner.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know there's a couple, just another thought that we're also thinking about closing early, like around Thanksgiving, because that's about when the regular flu season will start kicking in as well. I'm sure you all have all talked about all of that. I'm sure all of that's come up.
You know, it's we still have to get all of our required minutes and hours in, and it would be tough to give up those 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I love the idea. I love it. But we would have to then start earlier, and we feel like we need a little bit more time to get prepared, whichever model that we start. But there was another local school district that was contemplating moving up their start 2 weeks since the state laxed it. I don't think that they ended up doing it, but that was kind of their plan. They might still be. I don't want to say who it is, but that would be great. Any other questions, thoughts?
I would just like to say kudos to you guys. I mean, there's no right decision in this, and at some point, not everyone's going to be on one side or the other, or the fence even. It's just, unfortunately, this is one of those times where we got to pull together and just try to work together, because it's just a bad situation. But I mean, I appreciate you guys so much, putting so much hard work and time and effort into this and trying to care for our staff and the kids. I really appreciate it. And I mean,
Thank you.
I'd agree with Keita. Thanking you, the issues committee, all the people that have just devoted so much time to this.
Yeah.
Very unusual time, an unusual summer.
Absolutely.
Agree, and appreciated hearing that safety and emotional and physical safety is first and foremost of our staff and of our kids, but also that we're interested in their academic and personal success, which is of course our mission.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. That is it with that item.
All right, moving on to Dr. Adams and the anti-bias building blocks.
Jason, can you share your screen?
Yes. All right. Everyone able to see the presentation? All right.
Yes.
So obviously our work with our reentry plan has been important. However, we also need to continue our work related to equity and related to anti-bias work within the district. And so I want to remind you all of a board meeting that we had in June, when I was able to sit in on the conversation and share a few ideas that I had that we would be pursuing. One of which was re-examining or continuing the process of looking at our K-8 social studies curriculum, which was already in the process of being revised, and we are very much moving forward with that process. The second area was providing professional development for our staff related to anti-bias and anti-racism work. We are going to be including that at the beginning of this school year in some degree, knowing that we have many other challenges that we need to prepare our staff for as well. However, I don't want us losing sight of this important work. And then the third area is what I'm bringing to you this evening, which is a teacher resource, a K-5 teacher resource known as the Anti-Bias Building Blocks teaching resource, which is published by the Anti-Defamation League. And so I'm going to share with you just a few aspects of this resource, and then I'll be able to take any questions. So in terms of our equity resolution here in Webster Groves, there were a few key areas that I wanted to.
Is the audio clear for everybody else, or is everybody else getting a buzzing as Dr. Adams is talking? I'm hearing a horrible buzz coming through.
Jason, you are buzzing a little bit.
Sorry, everybody. Is that better, or I'll try to jump out and jump back in? All right, I'll jump back. I'll jump out and jump right back.
Sorry about that.
I was just focusing really hard at listening, trying to ignore it.
I'm sorry, I'm not. I was having a very hard time doing that. So
No, I get it. Here he comes.
Sorry, everyone. It's just not my night with technology. Can you hear me better?
You're back. You're back.
much
Okay.
better. Thank you very much.
Sounds better.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. So continuing where I left off, I wanted to point out a few key areas in our equity resolution, one of which is the concept of that we believe in fostering equity, specifically also acceptance and equal rights for children and adults. And then further down, looking at confronting issues of bias and social injustice. And so a lot of times when we consider equity or when we consider bias and injustice, we focus in on systems. We focus in on practices within the classroom or larger academic systems or discipline. Tonight, what I want to focus on are really interactions between students that happen in the classroom, that happen in the hallway, that happen out at recess. And this is a curriculum resource that teachers can use to help support and help to provide our students, our youngest students, with really an understanding of what they are doing in terms of interacting with other students who come from different backgrounds, who have different family structures, et cetera. So within this curriculum resource program, there are several key areas, the first of which is examining identity, which really the best way I define it, especially in terms of K-5, is really considering student backgrounds, culture, similarities and differences between students, and how that identity impacts their thinking and impacts their behavior and interactions with others. Also focusing in on how harm can be caused through actions like discrimination, name calling, different things like that, especially at the K-5 level, and how that can impact interactions with others. You'll notice a common theme in terms of interactions with others as we go throughout each of these goals. The third is the impact of culture on communication. And so how folks from different backgrounds, different families interact with one another and the differences within that. And then also helping our students to develop the capacity to recognize and acknowledge when something that is harmful is happening in terms of bullying, discrimination, name calling within themselves and within the greater institution within the school. Part of our conversation on June 24th was really helping our students to have the language and to have the knowledge base to know when something's happening. Sometimes they feel like something is happening that's uncomfortable, but actually giving them the tools and the language that they can use to share that with an adult who can be supportive. And then finally, how students themselves can challenge and stand up for one another whenever they identify that that's something uncomfortable in terms of bias or an uncomfortable interaction that's happening with another student or an adult. So what this resource actually consists of, it consists of a total of 50 lessons. 25 of those lessons are focused on K2. So there's not a specific kindergarten set of lessons and a specific first grade set of lessons. There are 25 K2 lessons and then 25 third through fifth grade lessons. Each of these areas have specific unit topics. And so there's a collection of lessons that fall within unit 1, which it focuses on creating a safe and comfortable classroom environment. The second unit focuses on student strengths, skills, and that identity piece that I spoke about earlier. Then the third unit moves into understanding and appreciating those differences. The next area, understanding bias and discrimination. So how do we celebrate differences and not use differences to harm one another? And then finally, confronting and challenging bias and bullying when we see it or when we know that it's happening. In our conversation on June 24th, I was asked what a specific lesson might look like. And so these were actually available on the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League's website. These are 2 sample lessons that they provide that are provided in the resource that we are considering that I'm bringing to you this evening. And so these are 2 examples just so you can get an idea of the content and the work that could be happening as a result of this. And so this is a K2 lesson. And so very much developmentally appropriate in terms of helping younger students to wrap their head around the idea of one, some, many at all. And so helping to understand really the concept of if one particular student has a need versus the entire class. So really bringing it back to that idea of the equity piece, and then also ensuring that we are not discriminating against another student. The second sample lesson that I'm providing for you is a 3rd through 5th grade lesson, and it's focused on being an ally. And so really helping the teacher to provide support for a conversation with the class around how they can stand up for each other and how they can ensure that they are supporting the needs of their classmates. I do want to point out that in these sample lessons, if you notice on the second page, there's a concept called a flipped classroom idea. And so each of these lessons come with a technology component or a technology consideration that can be used in supporting the use of this program. So in our current environment, these are conversations that can still happen. However, I do believe that these conversations are best to be had with in-person instruction in terms of the classroom. So why this resource? To provide really a common resource and a common language for K-5 teachers to utilize as a tool to engage in learning opportunities with students related to these key areas. The overall process for why we are bringing this to you now is, as I started in this position 3 weeks ago, part of that was really having conversations with principals who were bringing this idea to me. Several of the elementary principals shared this resource and said that they had dabbled with it a little bit in their buildings and really felt like if we were to do something consistent and systemic, K-5, that it could really help support teachers, but most importantly, help support our kids. And so really this is a response to a request based within the building. And this is something we are hoping to provide at the start of school so that we have a resource in place for classroom teachers to be able to use. As part of that, we are taking quick action in terms of wanting to provide this resource at the beginning of the year. So I want to be completely transparent that we have not gone through a typical process of getting teacher input on this resource and going through all of that. We want to make sure that while that's important, we want to make sure that we have this resource in the hands of our teachers as we begin the school year. So our next steps, if approved, every K-5 classroom teacher will receive a copy of the resource at the beginning of the 2021 school year. We are partnering with the Anti-Defamation League at the beginning of the year, and all of our schools will be going through a virtual anti-bias, anti-racism training, which will connect with this K-5 resource that we have. And we will be continuing these conversations with anti-bias and anti-racism work over the course of the school year, intermittently with needs around where we currently are related to COVID. And then also considering partnering with the high school, with Hickson and Steger, to determine anti-bias resources for teachers in grades 6th through 12th grade. Budget implications, the cost to provide all K-5 teachers and principals would be $7,858. And we would use funds from our Title IV grant, which really focuses on providing social emotional support beyond academic enrichment, which would focus really on school climate and school safety, which our anti-bias, anti-racism work very much falls in line with those principles. So at this point, I will welcome your questions.
Jason, not a question, but a comment. I will say that as a parent, before I was on the board, I worked with another parent to form an equity parent group within an elementary school. And in doing so, we met with teachers, and it was one of the very first things that we heard from teachers was they wanted help on how to handle microaggressions in and outside of the classroom. And so I really appreciate your work in bringing this to the school.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I should add that several weeks ago, really, it was actually last week, I had the opportunity to meet with the March for Change group and to share some of the actions and some of the ideas that I had a chance to share with all of you, and this was one of them. And I felt like we received a lot of positive feedback about moving in this direction, just to provide a common resource as a support for teachers as they're navigating these conversations with kids.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason, I'll second what Christine said as well. And I'll kind of piggyback with the question about the teachers. Have they, so I'm guessing since you talked to March for Change teachers, have you rolled this out to other teachers? I noticed they're already busy enough trying to get back to school virtually together, but how would you plan on rolling them out to the other teachers who may or may not know about this already?
Sure. So part of the work really will be to partner with principals. We actually have a meeting set up on Wednesday to talk about what the rollout can look like, and also the accountability piece to provide, number one, support for teachers as they're navigating conversations related to bias in the classroom. But then second, how can principals ensure that all students are able to engage in conversations related to this? And so, as I mentioned, we are going to be providing at the beginning of the year a virtual anti-bias, anti-racism training that will happen at all of our schools, and it is being provided by the ADL, which is the same group that publishes this resource. And so the goal is that the facilitators will be able to make some connections between their training and this curriculum resource. They actually recommend that we don't put the resource in the hands of teachers without providing this virtual training that they're offering. And so we are very much doing it together as a package deal.
Awesome. I agree. As far as the accountability piece, has there been discussion of what that might look like?
Sure. So I think with any resource that we have, whether it's a math resource, whether it's a reading resource, a lot of that really will have to be done in partnership with our principals to ensure that these conversations are happening, and that these conversations are happening in a thoughtful way, so that we can, again, make sure that it's not up to Jason whether or not he engages in this work in his classroom, or Kita in her classroom. We want to make sure that this opportunity is happening in a systemic, consistent way across our K-5 settings.
Thank you. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If no other questions, there is a motion.
Yeah, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve the anti-bias building blocks resource at a cost of $7,858.
I would be happy to second that.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. Great.
Thank
That's
you.
exciting. Thank you, Jason. Moving on to the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I will motion to approve the consent agenda items. Let's see, 4.02, 4.03, 4.04, and 4.05.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, moving on. We have a motion to move into executive session.
Sure, I'll motion to recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel and legal matters.
Second.
And can we have a roll call?
I'm sorry, can I stop right? I'm sorry, it's just personnel. If it says legal matters, I see that in the motion. I apologize. Or
Okay.
it's just personnel.
Okay.
Sorry for that error in the action there.
Do I need a remotion, or is it? Yes, okay. I'll motion to recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel.
I'll second my second.
And roll call, Sherry.
Mr. Addison? Mr. Addison?
You're on mute, David.
Yeah, I saw that. Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Dahl?
Yes.
Ms. Clendenin?
Yes.
Ms. Culler?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn,
Yes.
Mr. Khan,
Yes.
Mr. Todd.
Yes.
All right. We are in executive session.